2 minutes, 2-minute warning. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Gulf Intelligence Daily Energy Markets Forum as we kick off the first week of the new season, and welcome back some of our regular commentators. Happy New Year, everybody. The year begins, although it is the 18th of January, but nonetheless, it doesn't start until Gulf Intelligence says the year starts. So it now begins. The markets have opened in Asia this morning, a little bit soft. Let's kick off with our regular Monday morning commentator, Omar Najia, Global Head of Derivatives at BB Energy. Omar, we've been, in the few weeks that we have been away, we've seen oil prices open the year with a great strong rally up above 57 on Brent and back down again. Good morning. What's your read? And I ask everybody to pontificate their crystal balls a little bit out on the horizon. Omar.
So I think basically, we were calling for a higher S&P, higher oil and higher Bitcoin and lower gold. And we were calling for strengthening of the US dollar in the US dollar index, DXY. So I think you've seen all of that. You've seen exactly that. And I think you'll continue to see that. The question is, is the trend, I believe, in all four of those is higher. So higher oil, higher S&P, higher Bitcoin, and higher USD. And I think also lower gold. So I think basically...
regardless of where the infection, COVID is going, are we on two parallel corridors?
Yeah, you can start a very technical, detailed thing about, what each vaccine is coding for. So the Pfizer codes for the spike protein. I think the Sinopharm is the whole virus. What changes in the spike protein, or what changes in the entire genome of the virus is less than 1%, right? So maybe if you take the Pfizer, maybe if you take the Sino, then yay. So it really does depend. But at the end of the day, are we going to go and are we going to see basically, I mean, even the UK, the cases are improving and they're talking about easing lockdown come March or whatever it is. Even if they say June or July or 2022, the point is, I think it eases, right? So yes, no matter what happens with, there'll always be these things, mutation and, here we go and all this kind of stuff. But directionally, that is the trend. So I think the trend in all four is higher. Where we are exactly in that trend, that's open to debate. So definitely, again, nothing moves up in a straight line. So we'll see corrections, pullbacks. I'm not exactly sure. I'm very undecided if oil has actually, started its second wave pullback, or if the S&P has started its fourth wave pullback. I'd go like 70-30 no, but definitely possible. But again, longer term, I think all of them, including the US dollar, including Bitcoin, all of them will go higher. and not for the, not because of this, inflation and I don't know what, and printing of US dollars or anything. But if you actually look at a chart, for example, of the USD, that's been in a downtrend for such a long period of time. And it made like a very beautiful down channel for years. And it's broken above that. And again, people who tell you like, this is the question, right? If the US dollar is weakened so much, then why has gold started to fall? But in any case, that's what we think. We think basically all of these markets higher and gold lower.
Gold lower, higher, higher, higher. Peter, nonetheless, as Omar says, there's no graph goes straight up, although we're pretty close to one. Peter Maguire, CEO of XM Australia, welcome back to the table, Peter. My question to you is, as you give us your sort of crystal ball outlook, are we still caught in the cycle of glass half full, glass half empty, week to week? We're still in these gyrations, but just perhaps in a slightly higher bandwidth. Instead of 40s, we're in the 50s in oil.
Well, good morning, Sean, and good morning, panelists, and all the best for 21. Lovely to be here. So, yes, it's certainly edged higher, and building on Omar's theme, crude has had a wonderful move to the upside over the last, say, 5 to 6 months, Sean. It's been, it hasn't been one-way traffic. For a couple of months there, it went sideways and oscillated, and we had very little movement. But now in the 50s, where we run over the next matter of weeks is going to be very interesting. Does that US dollar edge back up to the 92s, 3s or 4s? We had a low last week, or the week and a half at 89.2. So well off the 103 that we experienced in March of last year. So that's the first part. Does equities creep up further? What impact does it have from the shale side? Do they really come back to the table? And where's Biden going to play on all of this with his overarching views as far as green energy and the production internally in the States?
In terms of the new Treasury Secretary, the very familiar Janet Yellen, expected to reference the dollar in her confirmation hearings to indicate, for what it's worth, that I don't know if it's sort of the broken record, but the U.S. is not interested in a weak dollar, but nonetheless still keeps getting one. But what is your thoughts on her strategy, her influence on where America goes in terms of fiscal policy?
Well, the first part, Sean, I think really our hands are going to be very much stuck to the wheel for the first 6 months, seeing how we build out of the current COVID crisis. Are we on top of it by, say, July 1? And that's a long way away. It's just harrowing across there. You can imagine, over the next couple of days, as far as the inauguration and how many people will be on.
Whoops. Is it me or have we lost Peter? I think Peter's frozen for a second. Well, that's an opportunity to bring in Tony Quinn, who's unfrozen and looking very, very sprightly there in Singapore. So welcome back, Tony. It's nice to have you here at the table again, CEO of Tankbank International. So I welcome your thoughts, Tony, on the outlook for a year that's going to be much more about backwardation than contango.
Well, certainly not frozen here at 32 degrees in January, so I'm very pleased about that. I think going forward, as everyone has said, really, a lot of it is pandemic driven. Where we're going to end up is vitally important, and depends on where you are, the luck of where you are in the world. I'm very lucky to be in one of the safest countries in the world. I think really above us is New Zealand. By a couple. We've had 29 fatalities since January. The market is back to normal. We opened our phase 3, which it was on the 28th of December, which means that Singapore and the region of Singapore, the greater region of Singapore, is back to business again. We've also seen the bounce back of the Chinese economy towards the end of last year, where you saw that 2.3% result increase. The only country so far that's actually reported that sort of level. That's incredible. I think the rollout there and in Asia generally is going to be good. I think we're going to see, things get a lot better here. I think Indonesia could be a question mark, and I think India could be a question mark. but a lot of the other areas around here are coping very well and managing very well. And, you know, the UK going through that sort of lockdown, it's sort of, I'm a UK passport holder as well as an Irish passport holder. And, you know, I know where I'd rather be, and that's not in either of those countries. Because they didn't do what happened here. They didn't lock the airports. They didn't do what they had in Australia. Australia are even more strict. And of course, Peter knows that most of the citizens of Australia can't even get in. You know, at least in Singapore, if you're a citizen of Singapore, you can come into the country with permission. You can't come if you're a work pass holder without permission from the UK. But for a country to actually lock its own citizens out is quite incredible. So that actually contains the pandemic. The pandemic under control means our business comes back, means the oil business starts to sort of ride back. But, you know, we're only really sitting on the same prices we were sitting on now from November. If you go back to November, we started to go on the downward slope. But if you go back before last year, we're still sitting at the 2019, 2018, 2017 price level for oil. So it's not changing very much. It's a slight fluctuation, but as Omar will know, $1 change is a few million bucks, depending on how much you've got invested.
Yes, it sure is. Or contra to that, a few million bucks loss. Peter, just to bring you back in after you froze there, but the point Tony referenced, and obviously it's a headline on the digest today with the numbers coming out of China, a significant sort of growth GDP on for the fourth quarter. China seems to be able to get back to pre-COVID levels while its trading partners in the West, Europe and America, are still in a very difficult place. What does that tell us about China? Has China become a self-contained economy now, a domestic consumer economy? It is, because we went through a lot of last year thinking, oh, China can't really come back until its big European American trading partners do, but it seems to be doing it.
Well, first off, yes, Sean, we've had a very strong growth as far as retail sales. So there's the first part, infrastructure, and the, I think, insatiable appetite for raw commodities. Have a look at iron ore, have a look at LNG, and all of that factoring in. So you've had that growth. I think also, no doubt, they contained COVID and seem to battle through there. And I'm not sure as far as the transparency, as far as numbers, but they seem to have that very much under control. It'll be interesting what happens in about 3 weeks' time with Lunar New Year, whether they lock people out or in or whatever. And then you looked at that number coming out this morning, which was released a couple of hours back. IMF are saying 8% for the year. They're at around about 6.25 handle for annualized 2020. Yeah. And it just demonstrates that 21, by the looks of it, will be a strong year for them. We've got 13-year highs for the CSI. Where else is it? Trade tensions with the states. I'm not sure what happens under a Biden administration, and obviously it looks like onward and upward. I noticed something on Bloomberg a couple of minutes ago on the Mirror saying by 2028 they could be #1 economy in the world. So there we are.
Well, by all intents and purposes, I suppose they're already there in essence, given from a sort of a cost parity point of view. Omar, coming back in from the and looking at where we are vis-a-vis supply, demand. Obviously, we just talked about China, and demand generally is finding its way to incrementally come back. But on the supply side, we had OPEC meeting last week, or earlier in the week before now already. But also we had OPEC still finding consensus, except they had this Saudi Arabia would do a unilateral 1 million barrel a day cut, while the other countries were sort of green lighted to continue on the pathway of increase. I'm just wondering, looking ahead to the year out and underpinning the oil markets, the OPEC plus agreement, how relevant is that to some of your calculations? And how do you, Omar?
Look, I think basically the big message or the big takeaway from the OPEC meeting is the fact that Saudi Arabia will now do anything and everything to support this oil market. So I think basically they need the money, they want the market higher, they will support the market, they will talk it up, they will even do unilateral cuts. So all of it is saying that, OPEC, which is in effect, plus or minus Saudi Arabia, and OPEC Plus, which is plus or minus Saudi Arabia and Russia, are not done yet. They want higher prices. You can argue about, what Russia wants and what Saudi wants, but at the end of the day, I think Saudi wants Russia to be on board. I think the Russians are happy with the price, but I think that the Saudis need the price higher, sustainably higher, for the balance of the year, et cetera, et cetera. So they will continue
But
to
if you take that point higher, but ultimately, if you're cutting 1 million barrels a day of production, no matter where it's coming from, ultimately you're saying that the demand outlook is weak. I've got to get barrels off the market here. How do you interpret that?
No, I don't think. Basically, look, the demand outlook is strong. The price of oil is determined by sentiment, right? By emotion and feelings and social moods and all the rest of it. It's not determined by somebody saying, +1, -2, and here we go. So what Saudi's doing is it's giving confidence. It's giving a bullish tinge to the market. So it's like giving market participants, all of them, like glasses that are rose tinted. It's not about the +1 and it's not about the minus anything. It's basically saying that sentiment in the market is essential, and they will support and try and amplify that, whatever you want to call it, confidence, sentiment, bullish, whatever you want to call it. It's exactly the same as what the Fed does. The Fed doesn't say, we're gonna put this much money into the market or print this much debt, whatever, and so we expect the S&P to get to 4,000. What they do is they give the market support. They give the market a bullish tinge. They try and improve sentiment. They try and say, "Don't worry, we're there."
Yeah, well, one of the problems with that is, I'm not sure. I take your point, but still, when you cut, it also sends the sentiment that demand is weak, and it also, so you can look at it glass half full, glass half empty, but ultimately the classic sense is you cut oil supply when you feel demand is not present. At least that's how OPEC operates. The Tony, on that point, just looking more structurally, where is the sort of storage issue at the moment? Obviously in Asia, any other structural developments that you're seeing as you look to the year ahead?
Sure. In terms of Asia, we're pretty static on the storage positions in terms of, storage creation, storage building, storage development. That's all pretty static. I don't think 2021 is going to see any more tanks on the market that are on there at the moment. In terms of the Arab Emirates, as you know, I've got 2 terminals there. There we're seeing some movements. We're seeing activity. We're seeing the ADNOC guys push very hard with the Port of Fujairah to connect to the Matrix Manifold 2 system, which means that they've got 3 monobuoys and SPMs rather out there already. That means they need extra access. So that extra access gives them access to terminals within the Port of Fujairah, so outside of their own system. That's very interesting because they're obviously expecting a push and expecting volume. Now, where can
we had them on the forum last Wednesday, and that issue came up. I was asking the port what state of development that was, a little bit vague, but it's under construction. The pipe that connects the ADNOC 8 million barrels of oil storage to the rest of all of you guys on the commercial side, just in case people aren't familiar with that.
Yeah, that's right, and that's been timed to happen in the summer. So we're getting a range of dates from May to July at the moment. But if that happens, it means that they have access then to all the terminals in Fujairah, which is actually very good from a trading perspective for those customers that have crude facilities in Fujairah, that rent crude facilities in Fujairah, which of course, as everyone knows, there are few, but there certainly are 1 or 2 that are there at the moment, our tank farm included, although that's contracted. But if you're trading with any of the...
Omar will be able to buy 1 million barrels of Murban and move it to your storage from onshore storage to on-store storage, which is really radical and groundbreaking for the UAE.
It's very radical and brand breaking for the crude business, because I personally, I've sort of been always a believer that you don't move crude as much as you should. You get it straight out to sea and get it to the end point. You don't put it through cycles of storage. But we've seen strange things happen, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see crude coming into MM2 and then working its way up maybe to Vopak or wherever else. Let's just see what happens, I think, in the future on that. But they're certainly pushing, and it's good to see infrastructure developments like that, because that's a sharing around the whole business. It's not just taking the whole thing on your own.
And have you any soundings that there's actually developments on that this week?
So all we've heard, I mean, we had an FOT board meeting, and Malik, our commercial director, and our team have heard very clearly from the Port of Fujairah that this is going to happen this summer. So, and from our engineering teams and from our guys on the ground, we're hearing something similar. So there's a big push. Okay, we've seen dates move, as always in the UAE. There's always a date, and you wonder which year it is when you get a month. But I think in this case, it looks like they're positive. It's only a connection at the end of the day. Obviously, their SBM lines are already there, but I think it's an important one because it gives traders another aspect to this, and it gives.
Well, you have the Murban contract going live at the end of March, and one of I think the prerequisites of that is that there can be no restriction clauses on the delivery of that crude.
Correct, and this gives them the ability through MM2 to, of course, get up to the VLCC line. So at the initial stages of this, they're going to get their product out, but the secondary impact of this is they can actually put their product in if they need to trade it, or if there's a huge contango in the market for 6 months and you want to park your crude. That's where I think they will hope for, but that's really not what storage is all about. But you never know. You never know what's going to happen.
Let's get our survey question as Omar moves around the gym. Is that the gym you have, or no? His muscles are getting too big. I mean, I don't know. It's the steroids or not. Bitcoin and steroids both together. Do you concur with the dominant narrative that the second half of the year will see significant economic recovery with the vaccine-led end of the pandemic? There's a dominant narrative in all the markets now that vaccine will deliver a bionic second half of the year. I just want to get a sense in the room. Is everybody concurring with that? Before we get to our panelists for some final thoughts. Peter, another big narrative that was present in 2020 that one would imagine will continue in 21, but the flavoring might be different. I'd like to get everybody's views on the flavoring of the Biden administration. So China was seen to be fighting sort of rhetorically with everybody last year in the South China Sea, with the US administration, with Taiwan, with Australia, your own country. What's your outlook for that posture and the impact it may have in 2021?
First off, I'll answer it as far as domestically here, Sean. I think it's just going to have to, how it performs over the next 3 months, whether we see some form of, I would suggest relief, or is this going to be ratcheted up even harder on us because, from wine producers to many different commodities out there, there's about a basket of about 7 or 8 that have been certainly ambushed and treated very severely. So maybe we've got to look for new markets. That's a domestic side from Australia. Now we move to an international side. Let's get through that this week. Let's see what falls out of it as far as the Biden administration and what their policies and procedures moving forward. And we'll see something, I think, within the next week, their viewpoints as far as China. And do we see a change of theme, or is there an undercurrent there that is going to be maintained? This is a transition, Sean. We're going from, if this rolls across in the inauguration and everything goes well, then it's a different theme. It's a different theme dramatically. And so I just want to get through that and really look at, within the next couple of weeks, how we roll into 2021, because I think there's some unfinished business that has to be put on the table. And if we get through that, then we look forward.
Well, we might get some pretty strong indications as soon as 1 o'clock on Wednesday in terms of the idea that Biden is expected to sign a number of day one executive orders. Omar, your opening comments, somewhat bullish, all market trends moving upward. What we haven't mentioned on this call today is the fact that there was an attempted coup in the US a week ago, which is, no small moment, but nonetheless, everybody in their sort of euphoria of what was the word that Mr. Greenspan used? Drank too much punch anyway. But nonetheless, a major event happened in the US last week, the ramifications of which I think are only beginning, but yet the financial markets spit it out like a salmon on a busy river heading upstream. What's your thoughts on that outlook for the year ahead?
So basically, people on the streets, they've been sold the story that, coup, I don't know what, and life-changing events, and the markets basically just go, oh, and continue. So one of them is wrong and one of them is right. I have, I really honestly don't
both
think...
can be right, can't they? I mean, ultimately, a coup has failed and the markets move on.
And honestly, I think if you want to talk about coups and you want to talk about what happened in the US, I think the ineptness of the whoever you want to be in the US, but whether it be
when you kick the door down of the Parliament building with a big sword and a big bang, and you chase the politicians out of the building, threatening their life. By any definition, that is a coup attempt. I mean, if that happened in any other country, it would be defined as that way.
The problem with the US is that people dress up with like buffalo horns and paint themselves, and they take the sword of Conan the Barbarian, and people take them seriously. I definitely don't.
Perhaps you didn't see the other 200 or 300 that were dressed in military gear and full battle that looked like they had just walked off the military parade and had gone into the building. But nonetheless, the outlook of its impact on markets for the year ahead?
Zero. Absolutely nothing. So basically, if you want to have a coup, it has to be, it can't be as inept as that. You have to have basically a political thing. You have to have a military thing. You have to have some kind of, information thing. You have to go for, information broadcasting, social media, all this kind of stuff. You had nothing. You had people dressed in buffalo horns and blue paint and red paint. I mean, it's ludicrous. This kind of thing, I think, look, between the two, I think the markets are right. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. If this is a coup, then it's the most inept coup in the history of forever. So,
well, many of them are. And I suppose the point is that the question that you have to judge is it a singular moment in time, or is it the start of something that has ramifications of uncertainty? It's a bit like 9/11. 9/11, obviously a tumultuous event, killed a lot of people, but in of itself was not a massive, it wasn't a war as such. But what happened thereafter, it triggered such a series of I mean, look at Washington, D.C. today. Looks, as they say, there's more military in Washington than there is in Afghanistan and Iraq, in the sense that what are the dominoes that will now fall from this place? We have the potential trial of the former president to go on the Senate next week. He could be convicted, and there's dominoes to fall off this. I don't think it's a singular moment. Tony, your outlook, your thoughts on year ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, just picking up your 9/11 theme, we're losing that amount of people every day in the UK and the US at the moment. So it's pretty horrific to see what's going on. What's it going to do to the market? I'm sort of with Omar on that. I don't think it's going to do a great deal. I think Biden's going to come in with a very much more environmental policy. I think Keystone will disappear again. It should have been up and running 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but it got killed, then started, then legal action as usual in the US. Everyone likes to legalize everything. And so that's not going to happen. I think Paris Accord comes back on the table probably from day one. He's going to spend a lot of time chasing Trump around the world for the next 4 years. Will anything happen in the next 4 years? I doubt it. I think in the oil markets, we're pretty static. I think that a lot of permissions for new drilling isn't going to happen. So we're stuck with the infrastructure we have around the world. It might frighten the money guys. They've got so much money thrown into all the oil industry, particularly the upstream assets, particularly in the US. I think that's the frightener. And I see that they will get more and more nervous with this administration because everyone's been very comfortable at a high level in business under Trump. Because actually, whatever we think of Trump, the top end of the business has done very well. And of course, that's his power base. And they're the people that are actually behind him, not necessarily the guys with the horns. So I think that, you know, we've got a momentous year. We've got a new president in the US, but will it do structurally anything towards the markets? I don't know. We've seen the biggest economic drive in our shares in the last 6 months, or sorry, last 4 months than we've seen in the last 2 years. You know, is that going to continue? Maybe that won't either now. Maybe that'll start to fall back. But I think in terms of the oil business, I think we're pretty static, as I said, until, as Peter and Omar both said in their separate conversations, until something dramatic happens. And I don't think, again, agreeing with Omar, that last week was pretty dramatic. I think it was a very false attempt at a load of idiots jumping around over a fence. It was obviously, you know, the procrastinator was the incumbent president. I think no one doubts that. But, you know, is that a big coup? It was a very disorganized one if it was. You're right, it is a coup of sorts, but a highly unsuccessful one. But I do sort of wonder, you know, bearing in mind the theme of last year was, you know, Black Lives Matter and all the rest of it. I do wonder how many people would have been killed in that demonstration had they been a slightly different color to the people that I saw in every single video that I watched. I do wonder.
But it was extraordinary that very few of that defending police actually pulled out their guns. I mean, they were being beaten over the head, but with a, you know, whatever, and they didn't take their guns out. It was kind of interesting. Before we give Peter last word, let's get the result of the survey. Do you concur? Yes, it's going to be party time. You know, pack your swimming togs and book your summer holidays. Oh, I'll have to visit Omar in Nice this summer. That's what the plan is. I mean, if that's the crack, it's back to the south of France. Peter, your closing thoughts on where the year is going.
Well, Sean, you know, where's it going? I'll put the towel over my head, look at the crystal ball and try and come up with an answer. I want to get through I want to get to the end of this month to see whether it's a smooth transition. We've gone through a major, you know, globally over the last 13 months has been nothing short of incredible. It's the only pandemic I've ever lived in. I'm 61, so I sit here now looking at it going, let me just... You
as a trader must be saying, let's have a pandemic every year because, my God, it's wonderful for financial assets. Rock and roll.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Sean, it's been incredible. If you didn't make $1 trading in the last 13 months, give it away. So it's been one-way traffic for so many different markets. Omar saying, you know, that US dollar created, everything went to the races, equities. You made a fortune out of commodities. You've done incredibly well when you're looking at some of those equity plays and, you know, the crude oil market. So let's have a deep breath. Let's look at where we are. And I think we're going to get through this week. I'm still looking at it going, let's just get through Wednesday and we get a clear indication. I'm not sure what the hell's going on in America at the moment.
Well, that seems like to be a place to wrap it up. But what is going on in America at the moment is the change of government on Wednesday, or at least the change of president, and a lot of things to fall off of that. Potentially the trial of the last president, which in itself is kind of an unprecedented thing. So I think a lot of unknowns. How the government reacts to the sort of violent demonstration, the sort of ratcheting up of the disenfranchised, or whatever that group of 30%-ish of the Trump base represents, who are progressively willing to get more radical and more violent. Does the government soothe them with more stimulus, more paychecks for free, or does it confront them head on? I think that is an issue for 2021, at least in the context of America. So it could be bionic, more stimulus, more checks, more freebies, or it could be arrests and trials and confrontation that could have a different track. Some of these things will certainly have ramifications for the markets. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Peter. Kick off a new year. Monday morning is always fun when it's a little bit bouncy and a little bit on, so that's good. Look forward to catching up with everybody later in the week. And until then, have a safe day, make lots of money, and see how things go. All the best.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.